Good afternoon, Dr. Shad. How are you?
I am incredible.
Incredible. I
Yep.
I'm hoping on the show today you're going to share with myself and the audience how to be incredible, because that is a good place to be in the world. And not everybody is incredible. I know that for a fact, because I had a client this morning who is not incredible. So I'm excited to get to know you, talk to you, and hear how you become incredible. So what do you say we get right into it?
I'm ready to go.
All right. So Dr. Shad, I'd love if you introduce yourself, who you are in the world, where you might be located, and anything else you'd like the audience to know about you as we kick off today.
Well, I'm Shad Helmstetter, and I do research and write books, principally in the field of self-talk and how we get programmed and how those programs wire our lives. And right now I'm in beautiful, sunny, northern Florida. And things are good.
Things are good. Yeah. Northern Florida. It's quite hot there right now, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I'm in New York City, and it's pretty nice here actually, but it's been extremely hot as well. But with that being said, we could talk about the weather all day, but we're not going to do that. So I have a question for you about self-talk. Could you define that for me and for the audience so that I know we're going to reference this throughout the episode. What do you mean by that? So if people aren't familiar with that terminology.
Well, from the moment we're born, everything we observe, everything we hear, everything we experience is actually recorded in the brain. And then every message we get from birth on, every message we get that is repeated frequently, the brain not only records that, it actually wires it in. And so that all of those messages get stored in what we call our subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. And our brain acts on the programs we got. And the problem is the brain, the part of the brain that stores all those messages doesn't know the difference between a program that's true and a program that's false. It just acts on the strongest programs we got while we were growing up. First, we got the programs from other people and the world around us. And then we got programs from ourself. That's what we call our general self-talk today.
Okay.
So the self-talk that we have today is actually a replay of the strongest programs we have that are recorded and stored in our subconscious mind.
And so what I hear in this, Dr. Shad, is that self-talk isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's neutral. And then what is that self-talk all about is the thing that we would more put a label on.
Well, it should be. It would be good if it were neutral or maybe bordering on the positive side. But
yeah.
The problem is, if you grew up in a reasonably positive home, during the first 18 years of your life, you were told no, or what you can't do, or what won't work more than 148,000 times. That's a lot of programs.
That sounds about right.
And so what happens is, now as adults, as grown-ups, approximately 77% or more of the programs that we have stored in our brain, wired into it, approximately 77% or more of those programs are negative, or they're counterproductive, or they work against us. Mm-hmm. So a way that it makes it really simple to look at this is, if you could imagine that the subconscious mind that stores all those programs you got, that would be like the airplane, on the onboard computer on an airplane. So that would be our autopilot. And if your autopilot is programmed to go in the wrong direction, then it's really hard to get where you want to go. So if you were on an airplane and you were going to fly to Florida from New York, but that airplane was actually programmed to fly to, say, Wisconsin, the plane isn't going to go to Florida. It's going to go wherever it was programmed. And in the human brain, it works very much like that. People wonder why they have so many problems and struggles and so on. You can usually look to their programs and you'll find out exactly what's causing the problem or what's keeping them that way.
That's interesting. Well, we're going to get a lot more into this throughout our time together. But thank you for setting the kind of the plank there. So, Dr. Shad, I've got a bunch of questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. First things first, what's something that you nerd out about?
What is some? I'm sorry. Say that again.
Something that you nerd out about.
Neuroscience.
What got you? What's your background in neuroscience? Like, was this something that you enjoyed as a kid? When did you learn about it? Like, what was your journey there?
Well, I actually started out in a different career entirely. At one time, in my first career, I was a linguist, and I worked in foreign languages. In fact, at one time, I was a Spanish-English interpreter for the United States government in Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And because I had studied foreign languages, later on, when I went into the field that I was really interested in, and that was human behavior and motivational psychology, I began to put two and two together. My hypothesis was, what if we think in a language that's working against us? What if people who are really successful in life, what if they actually what if they use a different vocabulary? And that's why I got started in studying the field of self-talk and why I got to where I am in my research today.
I'm going to ask you more about this a little bit later. I'm going to ask you next something that's going to be very personal to you, and I think you're going to like sharing this. And so the question for you, Dr. Shad, is what's something that's inside of your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's?
Observing other people and wondering why one person is successful and another person is not. Mm-hmm. I tend to observe people.
Mm-hmm. What's the thing about that you think makes it outside of somebody else's comfort zone? What would it be? Why would that be uncomfortable for other people?
Because I'm not analyzing people, I'm observing them. But people tend to think that, oh, he's in the field of psychology, he's analyzing me. I'm not. I'm just looking at what they do and how they're reacting to life. And because that's what I'm especially interested in.
Yeah.
And that's what I study. But yeah, that can make other people a little bit nervous or upset until they know me, and then they realize, no, I'm not being critical or anything like that. I'm just observing behavior.
Yeah. So what I hear is you're observing behavior without labeling it good or bad, positive, negative, or anything. It's just you're literally taking the information just as is.
Exactly. And I tend to be very non-critical. In fact, I'm not critical of people. Maybe because I have some understanding of why we do what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the next question is the reverse of the question. What is something that is outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's?
Unnecessary confrontation.
Gotcha.
People who want to argue just because they're programmed to argue and don't realize that they don't really have a point that's going to take them anywhere. And I find that unsettling. So I tend to either deal with it or just avoid it.
Yeah.
Which means I'm selective. I tend to be pretty selective in who I spend time with.
Yeah. How do you know if you're getting into an argument or discussion or people want some of your time or energy? How do you discern when it's worth it to you or when it's not?
It's always a measure of the other person's genuine curiosity. Are they asking a question or opening a conversation because they're curious and interested in what they could learn and where it can go? Or are they simply trying to state something, an opinion that they believe is their truth? So if the person is genuinely curious and open, that's the beginning of a good conversation.
Yeah. I'm looking for myself here too. How do you know if somebody's curious? Is it an intuitive thing for you? How do you know that somebody's genuinely curious?
By the number of questions they ask you about you. And you can have a conversation with someone and they will never ask you a single thing about you.
Yep.
Which means they don't have a genuine, and again, I'm not criticizing that person. That's just their programs. That's
Yeah.
the way they've learned to be. But those people tend to be more nihilistic or more within themselves. And they also, interestingly, tend not to be as happy as people who are open and curious.
I want to ask you more about that in a few minutes, because I think that just hit me as a real connection, something I'm very genuinely curious about. I'm genuinely curious about all this, especially the happiness thing, because you said I'm incredible. I think this is all related. We're starting to build a theme here. So the next question I have for you, Dr. Shad, is, and I know you do a lot of speaking. You've spoken to hundreds of thousands of people, so this should be a question right in your wheelhouse. Like, was able to give you 5 minutes and you were able to deliver one speech to the entire world. In other words, you could deliver one message to everybody and they get to hear it. What is it that you'd give your speech or your message on? And then what is your call to action at the end of that to the audience?
It would definitely be about self-talk and how our self-talk literally rewires our brain throughout our entire lifetime. And it's designed to do that. And you get to change that. The day you become aware of that you're actually right now wiring your brain to either succeed or fail. And as soon as you recognize that you get to change that, that can be an actual turning point in someone's life.
Mm-hmm. So what's the call to action? What would you want somebody to do after listening to your speech?
Listen to themselves. If you could have somebody go around with you for, let's say, a month and write down everything you say out loud. They couldn't write down your thoughts, what you were thinking, but they could write down what you say out loud. And then at the end of that month, you have them type a manuscript of everything you had said for a month, and then get a yellow highlighter and circle everything you had said that you repeated frequently. You would have a perfect picture of your self-talk, of your programming as it is right now. Yeah. And so you can actually do that. You don't need someone else to go around with you. And we're not in the habit of listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
We think we are, but we're really not. So it takes a little bit to develop the habit of actually listening to what you're thinking and listening to what you're saying. But you can do it. And it's kind of fun, actually, once you get started doing it.
Yeah.
And you very quickly realize who's causing a lot of the problems in your life.
Let me guess, that person is ourselves most of the time.
Yes.
I have a question for you as this is for me personally, because it's my show, so I get to do that. I relate to myself. I'm very extroverted and I'm very much an external processor. So a lot of what I say actually comes out literally in the second, and I'm creating my talk as I'm doing it. I'm curious if a lot of the times I'm just not present to my self-talk or present to what I want to say until I actually say it. So for somebody like me, and there's a lot of people out there that are like me, do you have any recommendations on how you would practice something like this about listening to yourself? If my listening actually comes when I'm speaking most of the time, at least that's a story I tell myself.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. What I think you would probably find really interesting and actually really helpful would be to start listening, even if you've already been listening, but start consciously listening. So that would be like mindfulness, being aware of being aware. And then what I would recommend you might really enjoy doing is start editing. So every chance you get, look for the opportunity to edit. When you're about to say something that might work against you or be negative or down about you or something, edit it on the fly. So just as you're about to think it or just as you're about to say it, turn it around and think or say the opposite, and then watch what happens.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's cool. That's, I know you do, you do life coaching training and such. I also I'm a leader at a coach training program. And one of the first things we do is we give our students or our cohort a list of dirty words in coaching that they should remove from their vocabulary. And what I'm hearing is
a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Things like the question why, because why, I don't know if you would agree with this, but usually why is not a very curious question. Usually comes with some sort of judgment or assessment. Words like the truth or help, like things like that just naturally come with usually a connotation to them. So I'm curious if there's any words that you would give myself and the audience that, in your opinion, should just be struck from the English language in terms of they're just going to be negative? They're just almost going to have some sort of negative connotation on us mentally. Is there anything that comes to mind for you? Because I have one that I've really tried to work on, but I'm curious what you have, and then I'll offer the one that I have.
Can't, won't, couldn't,
Yeah.
doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can use them. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you think about it, if you're using them a lot, not only are they directing how you think, but you're literally wiring your own brain with messages that could work against it. So yeah, I would recommend finding the opposite of those words, and that's pretty easy to do. By the way, there's a really important, and I don't know if this is a good time to mention it, but I don't want to forget it. There's a really important reason to practice thinking in the positive, a reason for being optimistic, and a reason for using words, the yes I can instead of I couldn't do that kind of vocabulary. And that's this: when positive thinking first got popular a few decades ago, there were many critics, a lot of them even in the field of science, that said positive thinking doesn't really mean anything. It can't really work because words don't have any substance and they don't really go anywhere. And so they don't have any real effect. And of course, that was before we had computer imaging technology like we do now that lets us look into the brain while we're thinking and while we're speaking. And what we've learned in the field of neuroscience is that people who think in the positive actually grow more neural networks into the left prefrontal cortex of their brain. So if you reached up right now and tapped right above your left eyebrow, that's actually a part of the brain that gets stronger. You enhance that part of the brain, you increase the number of neural networks. And interestingly, that's also the part of the brain that helps you find alternatives and seek solutions and find answers and take action. So you could actually say that's like the success part of the brain.
Yeah.
The exact opposite is true of people who think in the negative. People who think negatively are actually growing more neural networks into the right prefrontal cortex of their brains. So if you touched right above your right eyebrow, right behind that area of your brain, that's an area of the brain that causes you to shut down or stop or to flee or hide and not take action and not get things done. So you could say that's the failure part of the brain.
Yeah.
So positive people who think in the positive are literally wiring their brain to do things that will help them be more successful. Successful people all have that one thing in common. And I'm not talking about financial success so much as I'm talking about life success.
Yeah.
That what they have in common is that they have the same problems as everyone else, but they seek solutions, they seek alternatives, they find them, they take action, and they stay with it. And that all comes from enhancing the part of your brain that encourages you to do that.
Dr. Shad, what I hear in that, and I just want to mention this before we go to a brief commercial break. What I hear in that is not only is that what you'd say successful people do, but as you practice it and it grows stronger, it becomes easier.
It becomes your natural way of thinking. Yes.
Right. Easier. I'm not much of a risk taker. I'm scared to go do this thing. As you practice being open to possibility, you're actually strengthening those neural networks, which then actually the next time something comes up that really may have felt scary a while ago isn't going to feel as scary. It's just going to become easier and easier for you to see solutions and see more possibilities.
Yeah, it's part of your toolbox, and then you get used to it.
Very cool.
Yeah,
that's very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing that so far, Dr. Shad. We'll be right back after a brief commercial break. Okay, Dr. Shad, we are back. So you've shared a little bit about your background. You've shared a lot about what you're passionate about. And it's really interesting stuff. This is the part of the show where you just get to share anything you'd like with the audience. And so the question I have for you, as a genuinely curious question, because I have no idea what the answer is going to be, is what would you like the audience to know about you?
That there's a genuine value in caring about others and making that part of your purpose in life. Today, there are a lot of people who are very concerned about meaning and purpose, and I think we all either consciously or unconsciously would like to have meaning and purpose in our life. And I've just found that the people who do the best overall in terms of quality of life, sense of self, a sense of well-being, those and happiness, those tend to be people that find some way to help others, to do something
Mm-hmm.
that helps other people benefit in their lives.
Mm.
I think that's an important message because you can use it, anyone can use it. Think about that and follow the idea individually, and it always works. It always helps.
Yeah. So Dr. Shad, this philosophy or way of looking at, I guess, the world, mental models, is this something that's always come naturally to you, or is this something that you have like actualized to or studied or like later in your career? Like how did you actually come to this conclusion?
It was the result of studying the differences between people who are happy and successful in life and people who were struggling. And so it was the result of studying.
Gotcha. So as a scientist, when you were studying this, did you have a hypothesis that this proved to be true, or did you think something else before you went through the study?
It was based on I had first studied the vocabulary, so the language of people who are doing well in life, and also, of course, studied the vocabulary and the language of people who weren't doing well in life, those who were struggling continuously, and it was clear to me that they were very definitely using a different vocabulary. They were different. They were using different words. It was all English, of course, but they were thinking in different terms. And so I thought, okay, what kinds of things are they telling themselves? What's their self-talk that's making a difference? And as it turned out, one of the things they were doing consistently was showing a genuine concern and compassion and caring for other people. I thought that was interesting. And so I followed up with that to do more research.
Last question about this. Is it possible for somebody to externally show a lot of the positivity, a lot of the things, the success, maybe the success and like I said, we're not talking about necessarily about wealth, but whatever that means to each individual, but on the inside, they still have they're actually skewed towards negative self-talk?
Yes, it's possible to have the outward appearances of success without having any true internal success. So we're really talking there about one is the exposition, what we show in terms of being successful. But I think most of us pretty well understand that real success probably gets more down to how you feel when you lay your head on the pillow at night, and how you feel about life the first thing when you wake up in the morning. It really gets down to those things. So I'm far less interested, for instance, in the things that people might accumulate that say they're successful, and much more interested in how they are internally, how they are as a human being.
Yeah. Well, and I was asking the question that sounds exhausting to put up that front on the outside and act positive and have that success, but on the inside always have that more skewing towards their negative self-talk. And that did bring up one more question for me. Very popular thing to talk about in coaching or just generally in the world is imposter syndrome. How does everything we've been talking about relate to imposter syndrome, or how do you see imposter syndrome as it connects to this, if it does, what we're talking about today?
The imposter is based on programs that the individual has that they believe to be true, and yet they are, in most cases, false. So that is the person who believes, as an example, that the true value in life is how much power you have.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that power is bad or anything like that. I'm just saying that the person who bases their life philosophy, even though they don't think of it like that, but the person who bases their life philosophy on having that power recognizes that it's all temporary. There's nothing permanent about power of any kind, and so that leads immediately to feeling like they're never quite there, even when they think they should be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. Well, thank you for sharing all that. That's man, you got me thinking about the conversations I've had recently and how I would show up on this. I hope I would be skewing towards and building more positive neural networks, but I'll ask my wife today. How about that? She'll probably be a good correspondent for me. All right, Dr. Shad. So this is the part of the show where I hand you the hosting mic and you get to ask me a question or two. So it's your chance to ask me anything you'd like. So what would you like to ask me and that I can answer for you and for the audience? Anything goes.
I'm very interested, and it's a real question.
Yeah.
Why I like what you're doing. So I'm not trying to
Thank
be
you.
complimentary.
Yeah.
Somebody once said that a compliment is the end of a good conversation. So I'm
I
not trying
love
to
that.
compliment
That's so
you,
good. Thank you.
but I like what you're doing, and I'm wondering. I would be interested in knowing, genuinely interested in knowing, why are you doing this and what got you started?
You're talking about the podcast specifically?
Reaching out, yeah, communicating with others
Yeah.
in mass.
Yeah. It's a good question. I've answered this on the podcast in other ways, but the way you're framing it tells me a lot about your genuine curiosity. Because it's usually, and it's never been a bad question, but it's usually like, why did you start the podcast? And the way you framed that was really, really interesting. So I'll tell you the true story. When I was little, I wanted to be Johnny Carson and then Jay Leno. So that the Tonight Show shift happened. I want to say I'm 43. So I think Johnny's last year was like 92, 91, 92, something like that. And I always thought it would be so much fun to just sit and talk to interesting people. And that's it. Just like have conversations with them with no real agenda. And yes, I know that like talk shows on network TV, there's PR people and like, hey, ask Dr. Shad about his new movie and, his new girlfriend and all those things. But I just always thought it would be fun. And then about 2 years ago, I was on a podcast. It was the first one I was ever on. And I really, really liked it. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it. There's like positive self-talk. Like, oh, like, what do I know about doing this? And I knew nothing about starting a podcast. I was like, well, what would it be? And I'm like, oh, I'd want an interview style podcast. It's my style. I love people. I'm somebody like you, Dr. Shad. I'm really curious about people. I love humanity for the most part. And I'm like, well, who do I want to have on the show? I'm like, I don't know. I think I know a lot of interesting people. So let's just get them out and start talking. And so I just started doing it. And I don't know if you ever had this experience in your life as a writer, speaker, as a coach, or any of these things, but I've kind of had the same format for this show since my first recording was in October of 2019, and I'm coming up on 100 episodes now. And I asked my guests the same questions and get, obviously you can imagine, very different responses. I had this experience where I was ready for my very first one. And, listening to it's probably like the first thing you wrote or the first speech you ever did, you look back, you're like, oh yeah, learned a lot from that. But I remember looking at the questions and I go, I kind of like these. And then I'm like, when did I write these? I don't remember writing them. Like they kind of flow. They came from somewhere that was outside of, the right way to do it, or some sort of like, this is the best thing. And it was like my natural, I was in flow and I wrote them and I still use them today. I made some minor edits, but overall I use them. So why I do this is I love connecting with people. I'm genuinely curious about what makes people tick, what makes them not tick. And it's also a fun way for me to connect with all different types of people. I talk to authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs, athletes, military, and it's just a fun way to connect and like learn more about humanity. So that's why I do it. And then I like to share those conversations with that externally with people because I think they're fun. And I know that the audience is going to get a lot out of our conversation. It'd be a real shame if for whatever reason we connected and we had this conversation and nobody got to learn from you. So that's the other thing is I get to multiply the impact out there in the world by sharing conversations that I'm having with people. So that's my answer.
So another benefit of that is that it's very likely we can project this, but we wouldn't know for a number of years. But you will probably continue to think sharper longer.
Oh, I'd love to hear more about that because that's something I'm definitely attuned to. Like what? Yeah. Tell me more.
Well, it's becoming more and more clear to us that and I want to be careful not to step over into a medical discussion here. Mm-hmm. So we're not doing that, but it's becoming clear in the state of human behavior that the people who are the most active, clear, bright, interested people into their later years are the people who are curious and interested in others and for some reason enjoy learning from others. Mm-hmm. And especially those people who share that. So that means you're taking the information in, but you're also having to consider it, think about it, and then send that information back out. Yeah. It's a really healthy way to be. If someone is worried about losing their cognitive skills, start being one of the things you can do is to practice being really interested in other people, and that becomes, you start to become aware of being aware and interested in literally anyone and everyone, and that means your brain is having to work, and it's having to work when otherwise it might have gone on sort of into a passive mode. It's keeping it out of passive and keeping it in active. It's a really good thing. Plus, it's interesting and it's healthy.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Yeah, the other thing, the other two things that I know two of the things I like doing most in this world are having fun. Like I'm really committed to having fun, and running and doing this podcast and talking to interesting people is really fun. And two, I'm really interested in learning perspectives different from my own, or maybe they're the same, but they're just not going to be. No matter whether you and I agree on every single thing, which highly unlikely we would, you're just going to see the world in a different way. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And again, I get to do this publicly on a podcast that hundreds of people listen to at a time, which is it just makes it really fun for me. Curiosity plus fun equals this podcast at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. Thank you for the question. I really, really like the way you frame that.
I might add to that, for those listening, that along with keeping your mind active at any age, it's also helpful for many reasons that we won't take the time to go into now, but it's also helpful to do things that are physically demanding, that require practice and repetition, and so on. I one of my great joys is archery at the Olympic level. That really requires that you have a lot of focus, and it's also physically demanding, and so your mind is focused and very active on hitting that target, and everything that leads up to it, and everything just after you release the arrow, and so the mind and the body become really attuned, and so thinking sharp and doing physical things at the same time is a great combination.
Yeah. This is timely. We're recording this on July 28th, and I think we're 1 week into the Olympics now, or 6 days into the Olympics. So this is very timely that you're mentioning the Olympics. Guys, I saw the first day that the Americans were favored in archery and actually did not do well or something. They didn't meet expectations. But that's interesting. I'm not an archery person, but would you equate? I feel like golf is another good example of this, where, I mean, I don't know if you call golf physically demanding, but you're moving around, you're walking, it's obviously a very mental game. So I feel like golf probably would fit into this category where you talk about it, the physical activity coupled with a lot of mental activity.
Yes, it would be on the same list. Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. All right, Dr. Shad, I've got a few more questions for you as we start to get near the end of our time. We're not there yet. So, but I do want to say one thing because you got me thinking about this. One of the things that I love about this podcast is I don't actually know the answers to any of the questions I'm going to ask. You know how in life there's a lot of questions
Yeah.
that you ask and you're looking for a specific answer. You kind of know what it is. You know what it is to move your agenda forward. I have no idea what you're going to answer because we don't know each other, which is actually a really, the thing you're practicing about being genuinely curious. That's all I got on this show. There's nothing else I can bring. All I know about you is your name, your website, a little bit about what you do, but I don't know the answer to these things because they're a little more personal. So that's it's a fun place for me to practice genuine curiosity. And with that, I'm curious about the thing that you're most proud of. So what comes to mind for you?
I'm most proud of the books I've written in the field of self-talk because they genuinely help people. They're supposed to, but they do. And when I wrote my first book on this subject over 35 years ago, at the time, I knew it was going to be a best-selling book. I knew that, but I thought it would be maybe 10 years, and everybody would understand this whole thing about how we get programmed and how our self-talk literally wires our brain for success or failure. I thought everybody would just get that, and then I wasn't sure what I'd be doing after that. Yeah. And here it is now, almost 40 years later, and people are still saying, that's the first time I heard about that. Tell me more.
Yeah. Yeah. How many books have you written now?
I'm writing on book number 27.
Only 27. I'm kidding. Yeah. That's a lot of books. Is writing the thing you like doing the most?
It's one of the things that I like doing the most. And you mentioned that when you're speaking, I don't think you put it this way, but what I heard was that you learn a lot while you're speaking.
Yeah.
And that also happens when I'm writing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm somebody, I've talked about this in the show before. I don't like writing. So people are like, oh, you're going to write a book? I'm like, nope, probably not. I might do another podcast or expand this podcast or something, but I'm just not a writer. So for me, I learn a lot by speaking. Sounds like for you, the pen to paper or fingers to keys is one of the things that you learn more about your way of seeing things by actually putting it on the paper or on the computer screen.
Yes, and I had a goal from the time I was very young. I was going to write a book, and I had a goal to write a book that would be published all over the world and that it would help millions of people. And when I got to the point in my life when I was ready to do that, of course, you hear from people around you who say, "Oh, come on, how are you going to do that? You've never written a book. You don't know anything about that," and so on and so on. So I left and I went to an island off the coast of Texas for 3 months, entire isolation in winter, and wrote. And when I came back, when I flew back home, I had the book, and just months later, I was on Oprah.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I had a goal, and I acted on it, and I'm glad I did. It was the right thing to do.
Yeah. I'm just going to assume, and I think this is a fair assumption, that your own ability of self-talk was probably the key to you getting to that goal.
Yes. And I seldom use myself as an example in the area of self-talk, but I can't imagine waking up on a Monday morning and ever thinking, oh, it's another Blue Monday, or it's another one of those days, or nothing goes right for me. If those kinds of thoughts were ever in my vocabulary, they got wired out.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the perfect lead into the next question I want to ask you. I'm so curious about how this is going to go based on everything we've been talking about. So the next question, Dr. Shad, is what's something that you were afraid might actually be true about you?
I'm thinking deeply.
I'm over here. I'm going, I think he may have wired this right out of his brain, because this would be the thing that your mind has at some point said this is true about you that very likely isn't actually a truth.
Yeah, nothing is coming up, but that would be natural, because if it had come up, it would have come up in the past, and I would have wired it out. I mean, I would certainly have confronted it, dealt with it. And by the way, I want to make it clear that I do have very good self-talk, but I don't believe in perfection. Mm-hmm. So I deal with life just like everybody else deals with life. I just have it a little easier because I don't have to go through all of the negatives to get to something that's positive.
Yeah. What about maybe if we take a look back at your life, maybe from childhood or something earlier in your life? Is there anything that pops up for you there that you thinking about it, you're like, oh, I used to believe this about myself that I realize is not true? Anything that you can think of?
No.
Okay. Yeah, you have literally wired it out of your brain. That's quite the powerful stuff. So, next question for you. How do you see the world?
Incredibly optimistically, in spite of everything that's going on. I think we're going to make it. And I see the world as individuals, a lot of individuals. Mm-hmm. And we sometimes get caught up in the numbers, and people become groups, and then groups become large groups, and then they become multitudes, and then it becomes almost impossible, it seems, to deal with them. I actually see those groups as the people made up of the people that are really in them. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing: when you think of an infant that's just born, they're filled with this incredible potential. In fact, one of my favorite places in the whole world is the newborn nursery, the infant mm-hmm. nursery in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And you go there and you're standing on one side of the viewing window and you look through to the other side, and there are these little miracles of life in their little bassinet. And if their eyes are open, you can actually see them searching for that incredible potential that they were born with, because nobody's born to fail. I mean, there's nothing in the human system that is designed to fail. We are designed to excel. We're designed to thrive and do really well. That's the way we're made. And then we get programmed. So a lot of that goes away. But yeah, I see people, I see nations even. I see groups of people as nothing more than individuals. And each one of them has such incredible promise and potential. And that's what I see.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm naive about the problems of the world or anything mm-hmm. like that. Of course, we have to deal with things, but yeah, if I meet someone, even someone who is struggling, who's having a lot of difficulties in life, and life isn't working, I never think that person is one atom less than the person who's in charge of a huge company or successful in some way. Yeah. We all have that potential within us, and it, as I mentioned or said, it does, that potential maybe gets covered over with our old bad programs, but that potential never goes away. So I believe in people, and I believe in them very strongly.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. That's very inspirational. I think I'm going to state the obvious. We need more of that in the world. Because this is not, if you turn on the news, this is not the things you hear. Most any news story, most things that make big news stories or that people generally seem to pay attention to is not the abundance and capacity for people. It's the reverse. So very nice. Very nice. Well, Dr. Shad, we're going to wrap up here, and I wanted to check in with you and give you a chance to share anything you want at this point about how people can find you. If you want to highlight a couple of your books, anything that you're up to right now, now's your time. So off to you, my friend.
If you would like to, if the listeners would like to practice learning positive self-talk, the Self-Talk Institute has an incredible app. I really like it. And so you go to, you use the app and you actually learn listening about 15 minutes a day. And you can listen to positive self-talk in the background because the brain picks it up whether you're focusing on it or not.
Mm.
And so people can actually learn, they can get a lot of help rewiring their programs. So that's at SelfTalkPlus, SelfTalkPlus, SelfTalkPlus.com. And try it out. It's a wonderful, it's a great experience.
That's cool.
And I think you'll notice some differences. Yeah.
That's cool. I really like that. So it's something you put on in the morning as you're getting ready for work, or you can do it while you're exercising. Very cool. Very cool. And then I just want to plug, you've obviously got a website. We'll put all this information in the show notes as well, so people they don't have to remember the URL. I'll put the link to the app in there and everything else. All right, Dr. Shad, I have a tradition on the show, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a piece of cake for you. I always like to ask my guests to leave us with some words of wisdom, and the words of wisdom should fit on a Post-it note or on a small computer desktop. So what would you like to leave us with today? Some words of wisdom from Dr. Shad.
If you'd like to do better in life, don't worry about the big hills to climb. Just try to do today something that is better than your average yesterday.
Beautiful. I love that. It's like the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen is that, isn't it? It's like small improvements over time equal massive change.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Shad, I want to thank you for being on. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, have you on, and wish you the very best in everything you're up to. And I can't wait to have you back on and speak with you again soon.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have an incredible day.
Thank you, Dr. Shad. You too.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.